Welcome. This is Jan Carosa, and today I am delighted to talk to Joanne McCall. This is my year to talk about how marketers and businesses can use other people's platforms. So it was really important to me to find her, and we've been talking about this since she had her book in the works, and now it's a reality. And so we wanted to kind of get together and talk about her book. She's a media publicist and obviously an author now, a media trainer. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about her background. Joanne coaches nonfiction authors and business leaders to capture the media attention and deliver very compelling interviews. And you'll see this when you get a chance to read her book, Media Darling. And it's called Media Darling, Shine Through Every Interview. It's the first in a series, but let me tell you a little bit about her background. She's an amazing, talented expert in the field. She's coached people like Brian Tracy, Ken Blanchard, Dave Ramsey, Dr. Richard Bandler on how to position, craft, and deliver messages and become media darlings. And that's what we're going to talk about here today, that people who are now loved by media everywhere because of what they bring to the table. So we're going to talk about that. This book, Media Darling, Shine Through Every Interview, is the first in a series of 3 books. So I'm delighted because as we've talked about before, I think PR is a huge missed opportunity by marketers and entrepreneurs. And maybe, Joanne, you can step in and tell us why you think that is.
Well, first, Jan, it's such a delight to be here, and I appreciate that introduction. And it's just great to have a chance to visit with you because you just glow in the marketing field and with what you do, and you have
Oh,
great guests, and I'm just honored to be a part of that. So thank you for inviting me.
oh, my pleasure. I'm thrilled.
Why is it a missed opportunity? That's an excellent question because I think there's just so much going on all around us all the time. And
Uh-huh.
that whole shiny new object syndrome is very real. It's like, ooh, chat GP, whatever it is,
Right.
let's do that.
GPT.
Or GPT, yeah. Oh, and there's others too, the whole
Yeah.
AI thing. So
We're all,
there's just
we're all aglow in the new thing.
which is fun.
Hmm.
I mean, I agree, it's fun. And there are fundamentals that whatever you're doing, marketing, publicity, getting your message out there, there are certain fundamentals that will remain true no matter what those shiny new objects are. And the truth is, having someone else say fantastic things about you is better than you saying it about yourself.
Thank
I
you
mean,
for that.
don't you think? I
Oh,
mean, it's
absolutely.
Yes. So, someone can go on their platforms and say, "Oh, I did this and I did that and I did this and I did that." And that's good. You've got your friends and they're happy for you and that sort of thing, or they're jealous. I mean, who knows? But when someone else comes on and says,
Hmm.
Jan is the real deal. I have an example of it. Let's say you go to a party and you're at this party and you're with a group of people and you're all chit-chatting and someone comes in the door and they walk right over to your group and they say, hey, I'm terrific. You really ought to get to know me. I can help you with your business. You know what I can do? I can do this and this and this, and you really should know me. Okay, well, everybody's backing up a few steps, right?
Right. Exactly.
Now, you contrast that with someone else walking in and people kind of look up. And then I lean over to you, Jan, and I say, you know who that is? That's so and so. And you should get to know that person because they can really help you with this. That's that third party endorsement. When someone
Mhm.
else says it about you, it's why we look at reviews. We learn about a new product or a new service or a new company. We go to reviews. What are other people saying? And when it's like, for instance, a top media brand, all the better. If you get something in the New York Times, everybody's looking at that going, wow, because it says something about you. It doesn't have to be the New York Times. There's lots of opportunities out there, but that's just one example.
Yeah.
So I think taking advantage of what's out there is so helpful for you. And it's something to really pay attention to. And I'm thrilled that we're going to talk about it today.
Well, and I've always felt this way. I mean, you and I are both steeped with our backgrounds in traditional media and what you call legacy media. So radio, television, and print. And I'm always stunned at how people don't even, it's not even on their radar to consider that they could talk to a local station or eventually even be interesting to a national publication or a national, they don't even, it's not even in their concept or their universe that this is a possibility. I think social media has kind of gotten in the way of this. So maybe talk up the legacy media for these people that are shy of it and they're thinking along the lines of, oh, I need social media.
You're addressing that very issue you brought up first about missed opportunities, because that's a
Yeah.
huge one. The truth is, they've done studies on this, and let's say there's a late breaking news story, and we may first hear about it on social media, but where do people go? When they want the total
Mhm.
story and they want to hear the facts of the story, they're going to legacy media. They're going to the trusted brands that still have huge audiences. And why would you want to say no to that? I'll also add that in the last 2 years, I have had so many influencers, those we call influencers, who have huge networks coming to me wanting national TV. That is top.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
What
That's
a
been a big
nice
one.
trend.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, they see the value in it. And a lot of it is because they have subscriber lists and they launch something new, and they're experiencing just as many unsubscribes as they're
Oh,
experiencing new subscribers. So
okay.
there's like this, this flatlining going on, and
Mhm.
they're looking at how can they capture new audiences and new people. And so legacy certainly is a part of that. Um, it comes down to, I think, what the definition of media is. And there are three different buckets for that, which I think we've touched on maybe. One is you media, it's your own content generation. So
Mhm.
it's your own blog, podcast, it's things that you create. You do a video and you love it, you upload it. You do a video and you hate it, never sees the light of day. You have total control over it, your narrative, your message, everything. With earned media, it's a little bit different because, again, you're going for that third party endorsement. You have to
Mhm.
jump through some hoops. They're going to want to know that you do speak to their audience. You have a message that's unique and interesting. They want to talk to you. And then you get that exposure to this greater group of people.
Right.
And then, okay, so that's bucket number two. Bucket number three is social media or rented or borrowed media. So on these platforms, this is where you amplify. You amplify your own
Mm,
messaging, and you
okay.
amplify any other earned media interviews that you get. That's where you can say, hey, I was in the New York Times, look at this, or wherever it is.
Right.
So if you think of, and then advertising is like a fourth bucket, you can throw that in the mix
Correct.
as well.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's kind of like a table with four legs. They're all important. So
Uh-huh.
if you're only in one area, you're missing out. I mean, they all talk to each other. They overlap. They're
Mhm.
all important. Doesn't mean you have to do everything all at once all the time, but having that framework that all of these things are important is to your benefit.
Right. And that's good advice that you don't have to do everything all at once, but over time, like these people that are coming to you now, they knew it was time to move on to, these are bigger platforms, right? The audiences
Yes.
are larger
Yes.
than what they currently have. I think that's what people are understanding and I'm delighted to hear that there's a movement to understand that, oh, these media have been out there the whole time. We just need to get ourselves in front of them and they come to you to be able to do that. So I'm thrilled to hear that. So one of the things that you talk about, and we should talk about, the name of your book is Media Darling, and we know that the first impression is always the most important, right? You only have a
Mhm.
few seconds to make that good impression. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the attributes of a media darling.
Oh, I'd love to. I mean, mom was right. You never get a second chance to make a great first impression,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I've seen many people warm up to do interviews, doing live interviews, which is maybe not the best place to get your experience and practice and that
Mm,
sort of thing. So media training is one way to kind of rehearse your key messages and how you perform and deliver your material.
uh-huh.
Another is simply to do mock interviews where you have someone ask your develop a list
Mhm.
of questions. You need a list of questions, have someone ask them to you, and then on camera, share your answers in a compelling, interesting way. And you start to learn how to use gestures, not overuse. We don't want to do that. But, using gestures, varying your voice. There's
Oh,
nothing worse than the professor you had in college who spoke like this the whole time and you just wanted to, you couldn't be looking at the clock like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. I can't stand this. You don't want to be doing an interview like that,
right.
right? So doing mock interviews and learning and watching others. I mean, who's good at doing it? Who captures your attention? Who really draws you in?
Mm,
These are really key elements to being a media darling and learning how to do those things. It's being enthusiastic. It's showing up on time.
mhm,
I mean, don't be late. Don't be late to interviews. That's a bad, bad thing to do.
right.
It's being
Again,
gracious.
and
Go ahead.
another way you make a bad impression is if you're trying to get in front of the press and you want them to do things for you, you've got to be timely and pay attention to and respect their time. Yeah,
Absolutely. And
yeah.
I mean, we've all worked with someone that we just loved, who made it very easy. They were fun to work with.
Mm.
They knew their job. There was this great synergy because, everybody knew what they were doing and things happened. And then we've all worked with someone where it just was not like that. It was difficult. They were hard to work with. They had a bad attitude and it wasn't any fun. It was just difficult. So media is very similar. We're, all the same. They want guests who are entertaining and informative. They know their material. They have some energy.
Hmm.
That's another thing. Here's a little tip. A lot of people, when they're doing interviews, they think, oh my gosh, I'm over the top. When they have energy, they think they're over the top. And
Oh,
so they tend to be very kind of, laid back and kind of relaxed. And they think that's fine. But no, if you think you're over the top, you're just about right. You're just about right. And I know that from doing radio. I have a background in radio, and I used to have to get ready and do my show every day. And I always felt like I was over the top, but that was just about right.
oh, good.
So,
Well,
yeah.
and these are just some of the tips that are in the book, and this is why I recommend the book. And for to me, the resources are worth the cost of the book all by
Oh,
themselves because the resources really give you great tips that you need to follow, like the hand gestures. And I was really kind of surprised by some of those statistics you had in the book about how many gestures people can do and what's recommended. And yeah, that was really interesting. Well,
uh, uh, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, no, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that another piece of being a media darling and why those mock interviews or training is important is that sometimes when we're nervous, and usually if you have an important interview, you're going to be a
Mhm.
little nervous or a few butterflies going, or you might be really nervous. And sometimes the unconscious, when you're really nervous, will act out a little bit. So I have an example. I had a client I was working with, this was a number of years ago, and I had a videographer. So we were taping, we were doing mock interviews and we were taping it. And I asked her a question and it clearly kind of made her a little nervous. And so in the middle of her answer, she leaned down and she touched her ankles and then she rubbed her hands all the way up her legs into her lap. And I was incredulous is I think the word. And as I was about to say something, she did it again. So she's still talking. She reached down and she stroked her legs and brought them back up into her lap. And I said, wait a minute. I said, what was that? And she clearly was completely unconscious that she had done it. And
Isn't
she
that
says, what was what?
amazing?
I said, roll back the tape. So we roll back the tape. It shows her doing this. And she says, I did not do that. That was the response. And of course, you can't really argue with that very long because it's right in front of everybody and we're
It-
all watching you do this. So then we had to work on, training that out. So she was a
yeah.
little nervous and so we had to figure out a new way to do that. So when you do mock interviews or media training, these kinds of things will pop out and you want to correct them because it's very distracting.
You have some wonderful examples in the book about, and that's one of them. But it's really so important that all of us learn from those examples because there's a ton of pitfalls. You think, oh, it's just an interview. I'll just show up and, you know, I love the face you just
Yep.
made. I'll be good to go if I just have that.
Well, there's
Well,
a lot of
so
that.
what I loved about this book and what I think makes it really, really special, and it's like a whole niche by itself. I have never seen another book that talked about what I consider the foundation. So when I wrote my book, I was talking about marketing, and I said, before you get started and you start promoting anything, you've got to have this foundation. It's like building a house. You're not going to build a house without that foundation. And this to me, this first book kind of goes deep into the foundation you need before you have that first interview. And you call it the inner game. So maybe you can expound on that a little bit and tell everybody what the inner game is.
I would love to, Jan, because it's so critical, and I'm thrilled that you really saw that and brought it up here.
Yeah.
So we all are familiar with the outer game. The outer game is the results. It's the things we do to make things happen out there. It's figuring out what your key messages are. It's pitching the media, or it's doing your social media posts. It's lining up speaking. It's whatever it is. It's out there that you're doing.
Hmm.
The inner game is what you're thinking about in the background. It's what's going on in your mind prior. If you have any kind of beliefs that, I feel imposter syndrome,
Right.
and maybe you don't even say it to yourself, but there's kind of this funny feeling you get when you think about going out there and doing interviews or doing speaking engagements or
Hmm.
whatever, then something is present. So when you have those little feelings, you need to investigate those and work with them before you go out there, because it will stop you.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's why a lot of people have resistance. It's often what's behind procrastination. So if you say you want to do something and you find yourself not doing it, in fact, you're cleaning your bathroom or you're doing everything but, chances are you have some inner message going on that's preventing you from moving forward. Because if everything is lined up and moving forward, you're excited about doing it and you're doing it. So
Right.
investigate that inner game. It will make all the difference to you, and it's worth the time to do that so that you can have success when you're out there in the outer game.
It's so important, but and I think the people that are going to need this the most are beginners, right? People who once you've done it a lot, you build up confidence because you're more comfortable doing it. But I think for anybody who hasn't kind of stepped into doing any kind of publicity for their books, all these authors out there, they need to be thinking, I need to do this enough. I need to do my work on my inner game and get myself ready so that I can get out there and do the publicity that my book deserves. So one of the things you go into is so much is talking about this preparation this in this book and how people should learn to control their message and therefore control these opportunities. So there's the kind of two things that they should handle, but maybe you can talk a little bit more about controlling that message.
So, before I get into that, I would
Yeah,
just like to dovetail onto something you said. You're right. A lot of this is for beginners, but I will
yeah.
add that I've worked with people who have written several books and it starts coming out later. For instance, I had someone, he was on his third book that we were promoting. He'd done a lot of publicity, but he was having trouble meeting deadlines. Excuse me. He was having trouble writing pieces that needed to be written. And
Really?
it took a while to figure out what was behind that. Yeah, somehow in the prior books, he was able to get enough done, but he was missing something. So
Huh.
when we talk about these things being unconscious, they really are. We're really not aware until we expose the light to them. So
Oh,
I
well,
just
that's
wanted to add that.
interesting.
It can
Yeah,
be surprising.
that's
Um,
very interesting. Well,
yes. So
so
so moving on, what was the
yeah, so
next part?
talk about in preparation, because I know you help people sit back and consider what their messages should be,
Mhm.
right? And then you want them to learn to how to control the message so that they're not on, the fallback side of kind of getting stuck where they're getting questions that they can't answer, but they need to be prepared in getting ready in that inner game to know what their messages are and then being able to control these opportunities that are coming their way. So
Yeah.
I think control is part of the word here too.
It is. I mean, so here's a simple thing that you can do to kind of get started in this. And that is, let's say you have a 4-minute interview, on-camera interview that you're going to do,
Mhm,
and or you're pretending you're going to do.
mhm.
What are the three things? What are the three messages that you would want to get across no matter what
I
in
love
that
that.
interview? And put them in order. What's the most important? This is the really big challenge for people because usually number one and two are both so important they just can't. But it's a good exercise to really determine that. Because sometimes you have a host who goes on a lot or takes you down some path, and we can get into that. But you want to know exactly what it is that's important to share. The next thing is that's a 4-minute interview. Let's say you're doing a 60-minute podcast. You're going to have a lot more key messages for
Oh,
60 minutes, right, than you would for 4.
yep.
So you want to have all the what's important. What do people need to know about you, about your book or product or
Right.
business or whatever it is? And then it's good to have a story, especially with a 60-minute interview, have a story that illustrates each point.
Uh-huh.
People hear stories. When you tell stories, it draws people in, right?
Absolutely.
Yep. So have stories. So this is a way to kind of get used to that.
Right.
Then go ahead.
No, I was saying stories help bring out your personality too. Yeah, go ahead.
They do, and people can
Yeah.
put themselves in that position. So
Right.
let me share a quick one. All right, I had a client in New York, and he was doing a television show. There were 2 co-anchors on the show, and the anchors were in swivel bar stools. And they had a
Uh-huh.
third bar stool for my client to sit in, right? He's a PhD. I mean, the guy is brilliant. He's brilliant. He should be on this show. He was great. He gets on there, and for 4 minutes, he's swiveling back and forth. The anchors are not. They're used to it. In fact, when we got there, I looked at the chairs and I thought, well, who thought that was a good idea?
Right.
Because if you're not trained, and I never thought to train people and not to swivel. I mean, now I know, don't swivel.
Good.
So it's learning how to kind of control that. So anyway, that's an example of a story. So again, the
That's
importance of
perfect.
media
So
training.
well, and let's talk about media training because that's one of the things that you do, and you've done it with a lot of people that have, authors and other business people. So describe what goes on in media training.
So basically, the first question I ask people when I'm working with them is, what are you afraid to talk about? Or is there anything you're afraid
Oh,
to talk about? That is the first thing, because sometimes people have something they don't want to talk about. I have a couple of examples. One was this woman who's a relationship expert, and she's written many books,
uh-huh.
and she was doing all these interviews. But the issue was she had been married and divorced 8 times. 8 times, and she's a relationship expert. So who
Oops.
isn't going to ask that? I mean, that is like the first question.
Yeah.
So to her credit, she came up with a great answer. I mean, I thought it was a great answer. This was when I was in radio and I was interviewing her. And her answer was, well, you know how when you're in high school, you have a boyfriend, and maybe you go to college and you have a boyfriend, and maybe you have another one and you move in with them. And then, by down the road a little bit, you get married. I just married everyone right along the way. We
You're right.
laughed.
That would get a good reaction. So it's
Yes.
good. It's good to think about these things ahead of time.
Yes. And then I
Yeah.
had I had another person who had, when he was young, he was like 23, he had his first business, and he basically it was an overseas kind of thing, and he broke the law somehow. It's a felony. He got a felony. Well, he's now in his 40s, and he was scared that that would come up. And in this day and age, let's face it, things come up that will surprise you. So we worked on, how do you answer that? So when it comes to media training, that's the first thing. What are you scared of? Is there anything? No, there's nothing. Great. We move on. If there is, we come up with good answers. And you
Right.
know what, Jan? It's a funny thing. Once you have the perfect answer, you often aren't asked the question.
Oh,
You know?
interesting.
Well, haven't you ever had that where, you got in
Murphy's
some
Law.
altercation and later you came up with the perfect answer and it's like too late.
Oh, yeah,
It's too
exactly.
late. Yeah.
Well, now they'll be prepared.
Right. Now they're prepared. So
Yeah.
that's the first piece. And then the next piece is coming up with those key messages and then practicing the answers.
Ah,
Having an interview launch, the first 45 to 60 seconds of an interview is critical. It says, and it does 2 things. It tells the host, where they can go next in the interview. They usually have a number of different doorways. And secondly, it tells the audience if they're going to hang around for the second question or if they're clicking off and they're going somewhere else.
oh,
So you
yeah.
got the first 60 seconds really to grab people and get them interested in what you're
Right.
going to talk about.
Put
Yeah,
your most interesting message first. So you help people to pitch media also.
I
That
do.
that's a whole challenge to tell. I mean, we did talk about one thing where you want to have a good first impression with the media too, because you want to be the first person they call when something topical comes up in their niche, right?
Mhm,
You want to be
mhm.
the first person that gets called on it because they like to work with you. Again, you've become a media darling with this training. So maybe you can give people a couple of tips on pitching media and how you advise people on that.
You know, the first thing is to make sure you're pitching the right outlets and the
Ooh,
right person.
yeah.
And, you know, it's so much easier now than the old days, Jan. I mean, now so much is online. You can just do a little research. You can find out so much. Who's the producer of the show? And then you can actually find out what do they like? What are they into? You know, and it's not that you're being a stalker. You're just kind of getting a sense of who they are so that
Mhm.
when you do pitch and approach them, you're coming with, first of all, someone who's done the research. And secondly, you're coming across as someone who's customizing this. You're not sending a pitch that you sent to 2,000 other people, which,
Right.
believe me, does not work very well. And people get irritated.
So it's
So,
personalized.
yes, yes, you definitely want to personalize it by getting to know who it is. And what I find from people is they really, I mean, everybody's so busy, they don't feel like they have time to do this. I totally get it. But let me ask you this. Do you want to go ahead and take a message and send it out to 2,000 people and get basically nothing or feedback from those you don't want, you're not interested in any way, or you're added to all their email lists, which happens?
Right.
Or do you want to pick the 20 people or outlets where you really should be? Your audience is paying attention to them. You should be there. Pick 20, maybe even 10, and research exactly who you should go after and what they and customize it that way and go after that person. Believe me, you up
Right.
your chances so much. I can't even tell you.
Well, I know, are they talking about the topic that you want to bring out there? Are they too general? You want something, and I like it because this kind of feeds back on, calls back how you were talking about the influencers coming to you because they want to get on a bigger outlet. But again, when you look at bigger outlets, again, like you said, you've got to be able to target them to would their audience be interested in your message, right? So the better the fit, the more likely you're going to get subscribers and you're not going to have the unsubscribers, which has been their predicament when they come to you.
Right. And I would also add the importance of being unique. So figure out
Yeah,
how
yeah,
you're
yeah.
unique because they are pitched by, I can't tell you how many people they're pitched by
Hmm.
and the good news is a lot of them pitch badly. So this is good for you because you can be much better. Trust me, it's true. So, you know, let's say you have a personal finance expert and they want media and they go and they're pitching and they say something like, well, you know, you really should spend less than you make, and you should save 10 to 20% of everything you earn. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
How many times have we all heard that? Now, is everybody doing that? Maybe not, but we've all heard that. So how you want to figure out how are you unique? So
Hmm.
something that the media hasn't necessarily heard so much about before. And then the question is, well, how do how do you do that? So the first thing you would do is go look at your niche mates, people who share the same space as you, people who write or talk about what you talk about, and how are they positioning themselves? And it's not to copy. You're not copying them. You are eliminating that from the way that you would pitch. So
Right.
you come
Doing
up
your
with,
homework.
yes, yes. What is
Yeah.
it that's new and different? And also sometimes the hardest thing is knowing how you're unique because it's so natural to you.
Yeah.
So sometimes having someone else listen to you, talk to you about these things can point them out. So
Right.
sometimes you need a little help with that because, you know, if you're really good at something, you just figure, oh, everybody can do that. Well, no, actually not.
That's exactly true. So this is the first of three books, right?
Hmm.
What are the next books?
You realize you're committing me. Now I have to finish them.
Sorry.
No, 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 no.
I
Actually, it's
know you're
very good.
working on the
Yeah,
second one.
I am. I am. You're right. It's about, well, the working title is How to Pitch and Land Media. And you know what? Here's something. I need new earbuds because these keep falling out. So my apologies if it's irritating
Well,
anyone, because it's certainly irritating me.
I have to say, I've changed my entire setup based on your book to talk to you today. So thank
Oh
you.
my God, I love that. I love that. I love
We can
that.
we
Okay,
can
where
all
was
learn
I?
something.
Oh,
Oh
can't
yeah,
we?
the next books we
Yeah,
have,
yeah, yeah. The next book. So it's all about, how to figure out what media to pitch and then how to pitch them.
right,
So it's a lot of what we just talked about here in the last several minutes.
right.
How do you find them? How do you find their contact info? What's the best way to pitch? It isn't always email anymore. Sometimes pitching
No,
socially, through various channels. And a lot of it is just figuring out each individual media person and how they
that's
most
right.
like to be approached.
Some like to be text, some like email, some like phone. It's all different, right?
It is. It is.
That's
And it
good.
does take time. It's true. It
And
does take
then
some
book
time.
3.
Oh yeah, book three. It's what to do once you get that kind of visibility and attention. So how do you
Ah,
amplify it? Where do you go with it? Where do you take it then? So it's kind of what to do with it.
cool.
And I'm looking forward to it. So
Oh my God. So am I. So you can find Joanne's book, joannemccall.com
mm,
at slash media hyphen darling slash book or hyphen book. And I'm going to put this all in the show notes. Get her book. Your book will come with resources. You need that. That's all going to be at joannemccall.com, media hyphen darling hyphen book. And then sign up for her newsletter. This is one of the best newsletters in the marketing industry. I love my super savvy
mm.
because she gives you so much really good information and such great tips. And Joanne, I want to thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I've been looking forward to this forever.
Yes.
It's been great to see you and
Jan,
thank
you
you.
have been, and you've been checking in with me. Like, are you done with the book yet? I'd really love to
Are
have you.
you ready
And
to
you were
promote
so,
it yet?
I mean, you really helped me. I'm like, oh God, I got to get this done for Jan. No, thank you so much for having me.
My
And it's
pleasure.
just been a delight. And anyone interested in learning more, yes, please get in touch. I'd love
Reach
to help.
out and don't forget she's got a free assessment that everyone should take. You're going to learn a lot just by doing that. Again, go to joannemccall.com and thank you so much. Thanks again.
Thank you, Jan.
Okay.
Thank you. What a
Bye-bye.
pleasure.